As we watch the first subject going through his squat, it is possible to see that as he goes through his movement pattern, he displays limitations in the full depth that he is able to achieve. As we freeze the frame here, we can see that the athlete has his weight very much over his toes. Heels are slightly elevated, but more importantly his hips are too high, which causes his shoulders to be over his knees and toes and having excess weight forward, which often displays tightness and lack of mobility through the hips, which in turn causes excessive forward lean. Ideally, we would want our subject's shin angle and hip angle to match, creating equal parallel lines, unlike the model shown here where the lines cross. When comparing the first athlete to this experienced lifter, it is possible to see his movement patterns are smoother and the weight is distributed over the midfoot. Then looking at the shin angle and angles of the hip, here are the parallel lines that we are ultimately looking for, which helps display and enable a smooth movement pattern when going through a squat. When analysing what his limitations are, it is possible to see that his left hip flexor compared to his right is extremely tight. This is shown by his more comfortable body position when a block is added below his left knee. It is still possible to see that he displays compensation by arching his back, and you can see by his left hand that he is still tight through the hip flexors even with the support, and showing tightness through the back due to previous shoulder operation. After going through various stretches and mobility exercises to help free up his hips, the athlete starts displaying a better movement pattern as he goes through his squats. The improvements are helped illustrated when we start looking at the lines again through the body. It is possible to see that now the lines are matching up and becoming slightly more parallel, which, as stated beforehand, ensures a correct and easier movement pattern of efficiency. But yet, the subject lacks the capacity to perform the squat due to tightness of hip flexors. Subject 2 is a novice squatter. As we look at his movement pattern, his knees go over his toes too early in the squat, which is a classic indication of a novice squatter, which in turn causes his left heel to raise off the floor. When given a counterweight, it is possible to see that the athlete is already making remarkable improvement. These drills are designed to improve bilateral hip flexion mobility along with improving length in the hamstrings and adductors. But the main purpose here is to teach someone the necessary mobility and stability patterns to perform the squat effectively. As the athlete goes through his various reps, it is possible to see that he is becoming more comfortable sitting in the deep squat position along with going through the squat pattern as he learns to how to perform the skill effectively. Already after a couple of sessions, subject 2 is starting to learn how to squat better. He's starting to shift his weight back through the midfoot to the heels and having a less of a knee squat. As a novice squatter, he is already displaying a more efficient angles of the shin and hip compared to subject 1. This therefore shows that subject 2 lacks the skill to perform the squat. Whilst attempting the dumbbell snatch, it is possible to see that subject 3 is struggling with the technique of the movement required. When trying to understand what are the reasons and his limitations for him not to achieve the task, we look at his various factors. It is possible to see that he does not display any strength issues, but more of a technical issue. Here, when trying to perform the high pull, he is not producing enough power through the hips and just using all arm to try and raise the weight. After various cue points, subject 3 is starting to understand the movement pattern better. He's slowly bringing his hips forward, but yet lacking that connectivity from lower to upper body. To help develop this skill, we put him in the full snatch with the bar, and here he's learning how to drive those hips and get that connection through. We can see the subject becoming more familiar with the movement of the hang snatch as he moves into the triple extension of the ankle, knee and hip. By breaking down the skill of the dumbbell snatch into its various derivatives, subject 3 has enabled himself to actually learn how to perform the skill more efficiently, therefore showing that this was a lack of skill and not that of capacity. Here subject 3 performs the hang snatch successfully for the very first time. Analysing subject 4's attempt at the dumbbell snatch, we can see here the movement pattern seems fine, but yet the athlete himself is not happy with the movement. When we start to break down the movement into its various derivatives, it is now possible to see that subject 4 lacks strength and control as he goes through his various movement patterns. Here he is struggling to maintain stability as he's going through the swing of the kettlebell. He also chooses to use more of a squat technique rather than a hip hinge to generate the force to raise the bell. When performing the shoulder press, everything looks fine, but on the side ankle, it is possible to see that he is constantly adjusting his hips to try and brace up through the trunk. When going through the high pull, it is possible to see that the subject doesn't generate a huge amount of force. There is no hip drive coming through to allow their weight to travel. Instead, there's more of an upper body pull. From side on, we can see that the athlete is lacking in power. As he goes into his triple extension, the bar doesn't travel away from his hips. So from this we've highlighted that subject 4's lack in capacity is due to strength and power.